Yo, where's an editing tutorial?
Bro, can you show how you edit photos,
Yo, amazing colors, bro.
Yo,
Can
just
you show
one
me
quick
how you
question.
edit?
How do you edit in Lightroom?
Sick colors, how do you do that,
Bro, I
man?
really love your style. What can I do to
Yo, your
achieve
photos
the
look
same
so
style?
different. Is there anything special you do in editing?
On my recent videos, I got lots of comments where people ask me if I can show my editing workflow and like the process that's behind all of it and how I edit my raw photos basically. So I decided to just do that and film that and show you how I'm editing my photos. By the way, this is like the at least 4th or 5th time I try to do a video like this, but I never was happy with the results, so let's try again. Fuck, that's totally unnecessary. No one fucking cares because there's only one video online. Just a quick disclaimer, so to say, you shouldn't copy the style of others. And that's not because I'm wanting to say that you shouldn't do that because my style is superior and I own it. That's absolutely not the case. I've been inspired by others as well. But you will get the most quality and the best consistency out of your photos if you find the way of editing that you like and that you enjoy most, so you can do what you want and what fits your way of doing things. In my opinion, it's always better to be unique and just do what you want. And of course, if your style matches the style of someone else, that's totally fine. I just wanted to tell you that you shouldn't do it exactly like I do, like replicate every slider and copy the values. That's not what you should be doing. That's just a general way to think of things and just to show you how I do it so you maybe can get inspired. Alright, in order to show you what I'm doing, we have to jump into Lightroom, and I'll do just that, and I see you over there.
Hey, welcome back, good to see you. Welcome to Lightroom. So as you can see, I'm not using the regular Lightroom. I use Lightroom Classic because I think it's just way better than the standard Lightroom. I think the features are quite similar, but actually I personally prefer the Lightroom Classic version. You can get both of them if you have the Adobe Photographer subscription, or of course the entire Creative Cloud, it depends. But in every case, whenever you have the regular Lightroom, you also have Lightroom Classic, and I would strongly recommend you to use Lightroom Classic in favor of the regular Lightroom. That's also something I didn't know for a very long time, and I was wondering why the Lightroom of other photographers looked so different compared to mine, until I found out that Lightroom Classic is actually a different thing as Lightroom. So yeah, just so you know. The photo we will be editing today is this one. It's a beautiful ass of an Audi TT, which is a bit bagged, you might say. So the first thing I usually do is I try to see what I'm dealing with, how the conditions are, if my exposure was right, and basically how the lighting works. So first thing is I will increase the exposure just a bit, then I'm going to increase the shadows all the way up so I can see if my shadows have been retained, and yes, they have. You can see a lot of the car in the dark areas actually, because this is what it looks normally. And this is what it looks like if I bring the shadows up, and you can see all of the details here have still been retained and they are not being lost, which means the exposure was properly done. Okay, so now that we know this, we can increase the shadows just a bit until it looks roughly right. Then we can decrease the highlights to make especially this part over here on top a bit darker. You can actually see what you are affecting if you hold down the Alt key, or Option I think it's on Mac, while you're dragging the sliders. And you can see now that if I bring this over to the left, the highlights, you can see just one little blue mark over on the left here somewhere. And if I bring it all the way to the right, you can see way more things starting to light up. What does this mean? Well, the things that are bright now are overexposed. They are just 100% white, no details, nothing. What a lot of people do now is they go to the highlights, hold down Alt or Option and decrease the highlights until there's nothing left. Because that means that all of your highlights have details and aren't just 100% white. You can do this in some shots, but definitely not in all shots. You have to try around with this a bit to see if it works or if it doesn't work. For example, in this shot I think it makes everything look way too flat and we don't have any contrast left and it just looks like a washed out image. So I will decrease my highlights, but not entirely. I'll do it like around -20. Then I like to go over to the tone curve so I can work on my contrast. Now, one thing a lot of photographers do is they instantly go in here and make a classic S-curve because this brings contrast into the photo all the time. Now, you can do this, it's totally fine, but I don't do this. The way I do it is I make a little, I don't know how to call it, I think it's called a ditch or something, just like this. At first it doesn't look too impressive, but you will see what this gives us in the process of this edit. Maybe we can do it just a bit more. We'll have to work on the tone curve later on again anyways. But I think this is roughly where I want to be. Then I have to increase the exposure again in order to compensate for the contrast here, which makes everything a bit darker. We also have to bring the shadows up just a bit. Now, next thing I'm going to do is I will go over to the Hsl Color tab. Here I'm usually 99% of cases going to the blues and straight up removing them. Why am I doing this? It's just a thing of personal preference. And I also think, especially with cars, I don't want anything blue in the windows here. Because if I bring the blues back in, you can see that the windows are blue. And in my personal opinion, I think that's not looking very good. I think that black or gray windows in that case look way better, but that's obviously something you have to decide for yourself. Doing the same thing for the aquas, you can also play around and see if it even makes a difference. And you can see that the only place where this takes effect is in the windows right here. So yeah, let's just completely desaturate those as well. Next thing, I will go to the greens, bring them all the way over to the yellow. It doesn't make a difference in this shot at all because there's no green, but let's just do it anyways. And then I'm also bringing the yellows over to the oranges just a bit. Don't do it too much because things will look a bit weird if you do it that. I'll just bring it to the oranges a bit, like around -40. Of course, it always depends on the photo you're working on. And then I also want to get rid of purple and pink because I don't like those colors at all. Or sorry, purple and magenta if you like it that way. And I usually also do this because when you shoot with a wide open aperture, you will get that thing called chromatic aberration. Chromatic aberration causes magenta lines around edges. I don't know how to say it exactly, but you will see it once I start to increase the saturation of those colors. Now, depending on your screen, I think you should see it though. You can see all of those purple edges here, and they look disgusting. That's something that happens with cheaper lenses, but also with expensive lenses. But it happens more with cheaper lenses though. And it also depends on the way light is hitting your lens and everything. And it also depends on the aperture. The wider open your aperture is, the more chromatic aberration you will get. Because of this, I will usually almost always go in and just kill magenta and purple completely. However, you have to be careful if you're doing this when there is real lights in the shot, because it can affect those. We are lucky in this case because it doesn't make much of a difference, except for up here, but I don't care, it looks alright if it's desaturated. And you also shouldn't do this with portraits, because purple and magenta are colors that are definitely present on the human skin, which is why you will see desaturated gray patches on the skin if you just completely kill magenta and purple without being aware of this problem. But in this case, we're fine doing it, especially because up here you can see there are some purple things and they annoy me. So yeah, let's just get rid of those as well. So I think that's it for the colors. Now you can see we obviously have to work on the lighting a bit and we have to mask everything. But let's first do a little 4x5 crop. A 4x5 crop is like the standard thing you do if you want to bring your photo over to social media, because 4x5 works very good on Instagram, it also works on Facebook, and I'm pretty sure it works on other platforms as well. So we go to 4x5, make it straight, and see what that looks like. By the way, I'm also looking on my second screen because my second screen is color accurate, my main screen isn't, so I have to look over to the left to judge my colors, just so you know. Alright, I think it's not straight actually, so let's tilt it just a bit more. And that's looking good. I don't like the negative space on the left because the car's getting a bit lost because of those cars right here. So I will just crop in a bit more, like this. Never crop like that. Always give your car a bit of space to breathe. Let's just make it a bit bigger again. I think that's looking good. Crop might even be a bit wider. So now, as you can see, everything is a bit dark and still washed out. In order to fix this, we'll have to bring up the exposure just a bit more. And then the next thing is I'll be working on vibrancy and saturation. Now, something I have to explain about those two. At first you might think they are doing the same, but they don't. They are different. Vibrancy increases colors in areas where there isn't much color. So vibrancy won't add saturation to parts of your image where there already is a lot of saturation. It adds saturation to areas where there is not much color, whereas saturation increases the saturation everywhere. So we can see the difference if we just bring up the saturation slider all the way to the right. You can see that everything got more saturated, especially up here in the orange part in the wooden roof section right here. Whereas if you bring the vibrancy slider up, it might look the same in the beginning, but if you pay close attention, you can see that this first starts to add saturation to parts of your photo where there isn't much saturation. So what I would typically do is, I would always work with vibrancy and add saturation just a little bit in order to give the overall photo a bit more color. And we have to do this because we have deleted actually quite a lot of colors. We've killed magenta, purple, blue, there's no green in the shot. And that's why we have to bring color back in. We do this by bringing the vibrancy up, I think to somewhere around 45, maybe even 50, yeah. And then we can add some saturation. I think 10 is enough already. Okay, that's looking good. Now we can start adding masks. I will start by adding a radial gradient over the car. Have to tilt this a bit. And then I want to increase my shadows, so you can see more of the wheel area here. And every time you increase shadows and or exposure, make sure to also increase your contrast just a bit. Because if you don't do this, your photo will start to look washed out again. Because once you start to make the dark areas brighter, your colors will be more equal, which then means there's less contrast in the shot. So as said, bring up the shadows. I think right around here. And also the contrast just a bit. I think we can also increase the saturation on the car just a bit, so let's bring the saturation over just a bit. Yeah, that would be way too much. Let's just do it like 25. It's looking good. Increase the exposure just a bit again. And now there's one thing we have to do. We haven't really added contrast to the shot yet. I mean, we have by adding our masks and by doing this in the tone curve. But we don't add much of a difference between the bright and the dark areas, and the bigger that difference gets, the higher your contrast is. So we have to increase the contrast with this slider just a bit. And you can see how much of a difference this already makes. Let's bring it over to 35. Then I think my crop should be a bit higher, because there's a lot of roof in the shot. That was too much already. Let's do it like this. And then we have to mask. Now the problem with this shot is it's looking good, but the problem is you have a lot of bright areas up here and the floor is also pretty bright, and that can cause the viewer to not pay attention to the car at first. And what you want typically is to lead the eye of the spectator directly to the subject of your shot, which is the car in this situation. But everything is bright around the car as well. So we will just add a little vignette by adding another radial gradient, drawing it over the car. By the way, you can show the area that's been affected by hitting O on your keyboard. So I hit O again. We have to invert that mask because you want to make everything around the car dark and not the car itself. Just make this big enough so it's not affecting the car. Okay, that's good. Hit O again and start to remove the exposure a bit. But primarily, I will try to decrease the highlights here in order to get rid of those really bright parts up here. Now it's not working that good because our mask starts to fade out already towards here, but that's alright. We can also add a little linear gradient which goes down from the roof, but I think it has to be pretty soft. Now we also get rid of the highlights in this one. You can see that this makes a big difference. Also maybe a bit less exposure. Then we want to add another linear gradient on the ground here. Also make it soft enough so people don't see a hard edge. Get rid of the exposure. Don't overdo it though, because it will start to look weird. And one thing you can do on marble surfaces like this is you can try to increase the clarity, because then your ground will be a bit more reflective. I don't want to do it too much here because of the rope in the foreground. We could edit this out in Photoshop, but I think that would be too much for this video. Now, because we've added all of those masks, we have to bring up the general exposure again just a bit. And I feel like we could maybe desaturate yellow just a bit, because the cars in the background here are too bright for me. So let's just desaturate yellow just a bit, not too much. Yeah, -25 should be around where I want to be. And then we could also try to boost the shadows and see what that looks like. It's not looking too good. And also I want to decrease the exposure a bit to 30. Alright, so I would say this is our edit. You can see the before and the after right here. I would say it's a pretty big difference. And basically this is how I edit my photos. You can see that there's not too much of a structure. I usually just play around with the sliders and go along with the flow and see what works best. But this is an edit which I'll be pretty happy with, and I hope that this helped you answer the question on how my style works and how I edit my car photos. I will be doing another video where I show you how I edit street photos, but this will maybe take me some more months to do because I'm not doing street photography as much lately, but I definitely have this on my to-do list as well, and you can expect this to come as well in the future. Alright, because apparently I'm a bit stupid and I forgot to film an outro. I just quickly wanted to thank you for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, please consider following me on Instagram and also subscribing to my channel on YouTube. It really helps me out a lot. If you liked it, also give a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, please tell me in the comments why, so I know what's wrong and I can improve. And with all that said and done, have a great day everyone and have fun editing your shots.